Good evening, brothers and sisters. Our exhortation tonight is based on the Gospel of Matthew that we will hear being proclaimed in a little while. And I will no longer dwell in some of these highlights in this Gospel because I know that Father Vic de Jesus is going to touch on this during his homily. What I would like to raise in our exhortation are two very important propositions that we can deduce out of the Gospel. The first one is compassion. Many times we look at compassion in the way that we look at love. And they're almost the same in some respects. But I believe that compassion exceeds the limits of love. Let us look at the common definition of compassion. In the dictionary, it says compassion is sympathy, empathy, concern, kind-heartedness, benevolence, and consideration. Yes, love is the precursor, but compassion is what we show in addition to what we do out of love. Take, for example, your child, who at 1 o'clock in the morning is still out of the house, and he is not texting or answering his cellular phone. He may be of age at 21 years old, but as a parent, you feel like you're dying inside as worry fills your entire being. Worrying is a reflection of your love. He is of age. He can go home by himself. But compassion fills your being, and you decide to wait. And while passing away the time, you pray. And time passes 1:30, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and your child comes home. You don't need to wait for him, because he's a grown-up. But you waited, and prayed. That is compassion. Compassion is going the extra mile beyond what one is called to do. During this time of this pandemic, it is not enough for us to just love. It is not enough for us to just pray or pray over someone. When we give out of our lack, that is compassion. There are so many people on the streets begging for food. Perhaps they may be part of a syndicate. We don't know that. What we should keep in mind is that giving 1 peso, 2 pesos, 3 pesos, 5 pesos, 10 pesos, 20 pesos, 50 pesos, or even 100 pesos will not make us poor. Has it ever occurred to you that if we are facing difficulties in this time of the pandemic, more so with the people on the streets, or those who lost their jobs, or families whose head and main provider died because of the virus, at the end of the day, we will all have a roof above our heads. We will all have food on our table. And they will still be out on the streets begging to give to the needy, to the poor, to the beggars, to the ordinary man on the street, or to give to a complete stranger in cheap clothing at a supermarket whose cart is filled only with a few grocery items because that was all he can afford. And he looks at your cart that looks like you're going to live in a shelter for a long time. When you can give even when you're not obliged to do, but you still give because your heart is filled with pity and mercy. That is not just love. That is compassion. This is what Jesus did. He was tired. He was probably exhausted from preaching and healing and praying over the sick. He was mourning the death of his cousin. He wanted to be alone. That's why he went to a lonely place, probably to pour out his heart to his Father. The problem was, there were 5,000 people who followed Jesus and his disciples. Jesus could have ignored them, but he could not. His heart was filled with pity and compassion. There were 5,000 at that time, and many of them, I suppose, even doubted his claim of being God, and were there only for the miracle and the healing. In other words, many of us also follow Jesus because of what we can get out of him. Yet God understands our human weakness, that even in those times that we follow our own dictates, Jesus understands and will keep forgiving us. That is compassion. When you don't set a boundary as to how much you're going to love. Compassion is to help our neighbor without measure. As much as we are commanded to forgive 70 times 7, we also are commanded to help without counting the cost. That is what compassion is all about. When we don't put a value to the help that we extend to others. The other important point in this gospel is very prominent in our community word tonight that sets the theme for our community for the month of August. It is the word heed. This is an attribute that every true disciple of Jesus must acquire. Heed is to observe, listen, take to heart, and to follow Jesus. There can be no doubting the amount of blessings that we can receive from God through Jesus, but such outpouring of blessings is largely dependent on this attitude, heed, which means that in order for us to receive the blessings, the healing that we need, we are to show some form of goodwill on our part. While God is God, and we cannot second guess or prejudge His decision to heal and to help any one of us, we must show God that we are deserving of His trust. And we can do this by observing, listening, keeping His teaching so close to our hearts, and following His commands to love God and neighbor. To heed is not just to follow God, not just to know God. To heed is to get right into the heart of God, so that at some point in time, both the Creator and the created will become one. That is actually the desire of God, which is the reason why Jesus was sent to suffer and die, so that all may be one in Him and with Him. The compassion that Jesus showed is the same attitude that Jesus is asking of anyone who will follow Him. We are to share this same love that we received from Jesus so that others may be blessed. In times when we may feel that what we give to Jesus and to others may not be enough, the miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fish assures us that whatever we give will be multiplied. And this brings us to our own community. That whatever we give in the form of tithes and love offerings, regardless of how much, these tithes and love offerings will go a long way for our community to keep on helping our outreaches, to keep on helping others who are in need, to keep on helping the larger church to which we belong. What we need to do is to share this love of Jesus to others and to our community, for it is in sharing what we have received from Jesus that we need and we heed the will of the Father in our life. To sum it up, the other reality that Jesus can always put to good use, even the little that we have. What Jesus was actually saying here is that anyone can come to Him with what they have, as He will welcome not just the learned, the rich and the famous, the skilled and talented, but He will welcome with open arms even the simplest, the poorest, unskilled, uneducated among us, because Jesus can make use of even the least of us, which also means that He will welcome whatever we give, for as long as we give, because giving is heeding the call of God. Giving is heeding the will of God. In verse 14 of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14, Jesus showed His disciples the kind of sacrifice that every servant must have. A servant must be able and willing to sacrifice even his own time in the service of others. A servant must go out of his way to serve others. A servant must be able to sacrifice his own time in serving God. And this is the kind of response that Jesus expects us, especially those who have entered into a covenantal relationship with God in the community where we serve. It also means dedicating a lifetime of compassionate service to our God that is founded on our heeding or following Jesus. Praise God.